Welcome to the Two Beast Podcast. We're Chris and Ollie, and we wanted to find out what happens when you commit to making 100 episodes of a brand new podcast.
Join us each week as we explore the worlds of fitness, improving ourselves, and things that make us laugh. Let's jump in to this week's episode.
I'm going to start this pod with a sneeze.
That is not what people want to hear
God
when
damn.
they're driving along,
Welcome.
listening to a pod.
Welcome back to this professional podcast, the Two Beast Podcast. We've been doing this podcast for 33 weeks now, so we are pros. Don't worry about it.
You are in safe hands, everyone.
We're in safe hands. Actually, I don't think we've been doing it for 33 weeks. I think we're on episode 33, but
Yeah.
I don't know how it works, to be honest. But
Episode 33, we did, when we back in a few weeks ago, we obviously did them in like chunks, didn't we? We did like multiple within a week, so probably a bit less than 30.
Should we go heavy today? Should we go for a heavy
You've
topic?
thrown some, this is going to be a deep one.
Have you got? Do you like the topic that I suggested for
I
today?
do, yeah.
All right then.
Yeah, it's good.
Today, I'll start off with a quote. Actually, a quote that I found. It's as follows. It's from our boy Carl Gustav Jung. The shadow personifies everything that the subject refuses to acknowledge about himself, and yet is always thrusting itself directly upon him or indirectly. I read the quote wrong, but there's the quote.
You had one job. One job.
How do you deal with mistakes? How do you deal with mistakes?
Personally, how do I deal with mistakes?
And not to like I said in the notes, not silly mistakes like
Forgetting your keys
2
or
plus
something.
2 is 5. Oops.
Yeah.
But like actual serious mistakes that you feel guilty about.
So, I've always seen it as life is a game of decision making. Bit like the game of life, funnily enough, if you ever played that board game. You know, it's got like the spinner in the middle of it and you take turns to go around this board and make decisions.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
I won't pretend to know anything if talking about it, but yeah.
Essentially, that is quite a good representative of life because you make decisions. It's all about making decisions. Whether you have like sufficient amount of time to think about the decisions you're going to make or whether it has to be like on the fly, right? So from my perspective and how I deal with them is whatever the mistake is that you've made, you're either going to win or you're going to learn. That's how I see life, right? So you either make a decision and it comes out good, or you make a decision and it's not ideal. If you let that decision that you've made haunt you and you worry about it too much, you're not learning from it. It's just always there hanging over your head. Whereas if you can learn from your mistakes, that's like the biggest thing. So I just try and see every opportunity in life as a way to learn and a way to get better, essentially. And throw a bit of a positive spin on it. So even if you make a negative mistake, okay, how can I make it better if I end up in that situation again? Or how can I be a better person through learning from those mistakes that I've made?
And what if the mistake that you've made has already caused untold levels of damage to an individual person? With whom you respect. And now it's going to be like, it's going to be very, very difficult to get back from that, isn't it? How would you go about it?
Again, I think self-reflection. I think self-reflection is a really important tool that not a lot of people use. And I think even if the damage is unrepairable, I think you just have to accept that you made a decision. These are now the consequences that you're having to deal with. And you can either sit there and dwell in it and let it overtake you and just be sad all the time and be like negative, or you can actually try and learn and be a better person from it. So
it's almost like the willingness to let that person go and let them be angry at you for the rest of time, because there's not too much you can do about it now except for not do that again.
Yeah, it's learning. It's all learning. That's what mistakes are to me. There's just a way to learn and a way to be better. Because you can't sit there and dwell in the past. You've made that decision now. If you sit there and dwell in the past and be all negative, you're just going to be negative towards other people. And then when you go forward, you haven't learned anything. So then you're probably likely to make the same mistakes again. So if you can set, and again, that's the biggest thing. So like, it's reflect rather than dwell. Right? So make it a positive as much as you possibly can. And that's like, obviously easier said than done, right? Like, there's going to be a period of mourning and there's going to be a period of like, mate, this sucks. Like, but once you accept that that is what it is and you want to move forward and you want to improve, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it, really.
So what if I'm a fairly brash and callous individual, as you know, and often I'm cautious to say I'm cautious to identify with someone as someone who tells the truth, because too many people hide behind the truth as an excuse to be rude to people. You see a lot of very unintelligent diplomats or people that are poor at diplomacy, sort of say that classic thing. You can imagine the kind of person that says it, well, I just say the truth, and if they don't like it, then fuck them,
Yeah.
And the last person I want to be is them. But the thing about telling the truth is obviously right. The truth is the ultimate truth. So I suppose...
Is it in delivery then?
Yes, I suppose the mistakes would be in delivery. But what if... I'm playing with the idea now of there's been lots of occasions in the last, say, 6 to 12 months where I've delivered the truth in a very harsh and frankly lazy manner in reflection. One, I don't feel like I've got any more time to give to it. So it's kind of like, well, at least if I get the truth out there, it's at least out there. And at least then people can fucking sink or swim.
It's like a weight off your chest.
I guess so. But then, well, that feels selfish too, because there's a difference between telling the truth to say that you told the truth and telling the truth so that it actually has an impact.
And actually allows that person to self-reflect on themselves and improve themselves. Because what you don't want to do is throw that truth out there, like you say, and be all negative about it. So then that person's like, well, now I feel shit. Whereas if you can deliver it in a way that, I don't know who talks about this. Is it Jordan Peterson talking about this? Or has he talked about this sort of stuff?
I mean, I've got some... I listened to a podcast with him and Jocko the other day that really helped me, because this is something I've been reflecting on the last couple of weeks really closely, with a story that I'll kind of tell. I kind of can't, because people might actually figure out it's them, and then it'll be a problem. But Jordan does talk about this stuff a lot.
But essentially, it's like there's going to be a bit of short-term pain delivering that. But if you can make it so that the long-term, that person's going to be better for it, then...
My problem with that is that it relies on other people again, and you can't if the short-term pain has to be delivered in a manner that they are actually going to take on board, and that's my responsibility. I can't hide behind, well, I've told them that they're stupid, so if they don't change it, then fuck them. Do you know what I mean? Because if I go like that with everyone, I could 100%, if I was callous and lazy with my delivery of truth, then I could justify cutting off every single person that I've ever known.
Well, you alienate yourself, don't you, essentially?
Yeah, because no one likes to hear criticism in a rude manner. No one, that's justified.
Yeah.
That's completely justified.
Yeah.
Equally, there is a time where it's necessary to deliver things in a proper way that may hurt. It's finding that balance. It's a really difficult balance.
It's a judgment call, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a... in some regards, I kind of liken it to my job, right? Like, in my job, I have to make what we call like a dynamic risk assessment. So that means, you have like risk assessments of stuff when you sort of like, you look at a job, you break everything down individually, and then you write out what could happen and how you're going to minimize the impact of that occurring. It's very hard to do that when your job is there's so many variables that could happen that can spring up. So you have to make what is called a dynamic risk assessment. And that essentially comes in like when we set a boulder, if it's got like a jump move in it, and we all as a team have to decide whether that jump move is going to be safe or whether it's not. So then we have to change it or we leave it. And you can kind of liken that to real life in that, like, in some of those moments, you have to make a judgment call and you have to make a dynamic risk assessment. You have to go, okay, and it's kind of down to like time pressure, right? Like if you have the ability to take some time to really think through how you're going to deliver it, great. But sometimes you don't have that. You don't have that ability to be able to. You don't have the time to be able to do that. So then you have to make a dynamic risk assessment, and the way it comes out is the way it comes out. Kind of comes back to that. We've had this conversation loads of times about communication, right? Like communication skills are they're so important in this life. Yeah. And it just makes those situations when you have to give hard truths or whatever it is so much easier. you know.
Well, the other thing with the communication thing is that it requires effort, and
You have to put some time in, yeah.
yeah, one of there's certain people that I don't care if I'm rude to. To be quite frank, I don't care. That's why the quote about the shadows relevant to this topic of conversation, I think, because I was speaking to Jess about it yesterday, and there's certain people that I've said things to that I've told the truth, but it's been in a lazy manner, and it's a way that realistically, in hindsight, they probably aren't going to take on board. They're just going to get defensive, and that's that. And they probably, so my net result is all I've done to that person pretty much is just put more hurt into the world.
Yeah.
And achieve nothing from it, which is not ideal. Equally, for those individuals that I have in mind, I don't care. To be frank and truthful about it. I feel like I should, but it's just not, it's a time thing. It's just a time thing. I've got so many other priorities that I'm working on, so many people that I do actually care about. And I think maybe what's happened recently, very, very recently, is like we've both gone through pretty big changes recently in the sense that we've met partners that we really like. And we think, fucking hell, these are actually, this might, well, let's fucking calm down here because we don't want to get too excited, but this might be the one, you know? And so
100%.
I don't know if you felt like this as well, but I've kind of felt like all of my attention and focus right now is this new amazing thing that suddenly everyone else is kind of taking a back seat. And that's normal. But then my vice of me telling the truth and being lazy with people that don't really matter, now that everyone else is kind of taking a back seat in the importance list, now they're fucking getting it and they don't need it. They can't have that. They don't deserve that level of rudeness. Do you know what I mean? Do you feel like that at all, or is that just me?
Yeah, but I guess it comes down to like, you've only got a certain, and we've talked about it before, bandwidth, right? You've only got a certain amount of energy that you could, so some of it you have to keep for yourself, otherwise you'll end up, dropping into like despair and like depression and God knows what else, right? But then you can't give it out to everyone, because then you haven't got any for yourself. So it's like a constant juggling act. And I think what you said is correct, like, it's normal. It's normal to have this when you get into a relationship with someone in the first, like, probably maybe 12 to 18 months, you are just like solely obsessed with that person. And I think it's just a balancing act of making sure that you're not alienating the people that, like your friends and your family and everyone else. You're essentially, what you're doing instead is sort of bringing that person into your, what we like to call our foxhole, right? Like you're bringing that person in. You're not like solely focusing on them and not worrying about them, right? So, yeah, and it's just energy and bandwidth and what you can give to a person. But I think you also have to make sure that you are giving it to the people that have been there since day one, right? But on the flip side of that, you can't, like, you're not going to please everyone. And that's, I've been guilty in the past and still am trying to work on being a people pleaser and not, because not everyone's going to like you. It's just the way it is, man. Like, you can't be friends with everyone on this planet. It's just like, it's 8 billion people. That's not going to happen, is it? So, yeah, it's an important thing to try and balance as best as you can, right?
I think in your situation with the people pleasing, I think that you would actually, and I think you've figured this out for yourself anyway, you don't need me to tell you, but as you say no to more people, and actually, because you aren't a bad person inherently.
No.
And you aren't, people pleasing and being people orientated is two different things.
Very different things, yeah.
And everything that you do in your spare time, it's not like when you're not people pleasing, you're wasting your fucking life away. You're building yourself up, and rightfully so, because the world is way tougher than us. So we need to fucking get some shit on here. We need to build some shit pretty fast. We need to build some resilience. We need to build some character. We need to build all that shit. So I think saying no to people in the short term is cruel to be kind, because ultimately where you will take that is, I think you with more power ultimately is more benevolence than if you were just stuck on the ground kind of dealing with the small shit.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
and I also, a brief thing about, because I've heard this a lot, and I used to think like this as well, and I now feel somewhat differently. When you said about you have to look after the people that have been there since day one, that is true. Obviously, you can't just abandon people. Loyalty is massive.
Yeah.
I also think if you hold on, we're all a team working through life together. And so we all understand that life has changes. And the introduction of a partner later on, family, marriage, all that stuff further down the road, that is one of those massive changing points where the stack changes. I mean, already, you don't need me as much now that you've got Emma.
Yeah.
Because there's some things that you want to talk about that bothers you, that you rather talk to her about than me, and is probably better suited to give you advice on them than me, frankly. When you have all your advice coming from one source, inevitably it's going to be inefficient at times.
Yeah, it's going to be biased, isn't it, right?
So I think, and I remember Jess on like one of our first dates. I haven't spoken to her about it since. It'd be interesting to delve more into what she was thinking, because it was such a brief sentence and then we scathed over it that it could have meant anything, you know. But she said her friend was having a baby and she was like, what I really want to make sure is that she doesn't lose herself. She doesn't lose doing the things that she wants to do. And I was thinking to myself at the time, I've thought about that since. There's a lot of stuff that we said on that first date that I've forgotten about now, but that bit stuck because I thought, what is the difference between forgetting who you are and growing into someone new? So you have a baby, right?
Yeah.
Let's say your passion, pre-baby, your passion is painting.
Yeah.
You love to paint. You think that is your purpose in the world. You create artwork that gives people hope and inspires people and all that stuff, and that's what you were put on this earth to do. Then you have a kid come along. Now you don't want to paint anymore. All you want to do is raise that child to be a better version of you, because putting them in the world, they've got more potential than you, so you want them to fulfill that potential and change the world in their own way. Have you lost yourself, or have you gained a new direction?
I think your purpose has changed.
Me too.
I think that's all it is.
I think so.
I think it's just a change in purpose, which
Yeah.
I think happens from when you're a child, when you get into teenage, when you get into adulthood.
Yeah.
Like, your purpose is not constantly changing. There's always like some direction that you have to have. And especially with the introduction of kids, like, yeah, 100%, that is going to change your world. Let's flip it upside down, right? Because it's not about you anymore. It's about them. So, but in the same vein, I think you do have to keep some form of, what do you want to call it? Some form of, like, it's not really a sense of self, because that sounds selfish, right? But there is a level of, you can't sort of lose yourself in what you want to do, because, well, I don't know, it's a tricky one, isn't it?
I think the
tricky
saying
thing to try and explain.
The saying that you're maybe looking for, I heard this the other day and it helped me, was you have to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, if you look back at the 48 injury that I had, where I busted my legs through basically fucking self-harm.
Yeah.
Basically just running well beyond what I should have been able to do. I was out for 6 weeks. You know, yes, it's all very impressive that you're so tough and you can go through all of that and you can carry on going on hurting legs. But now you're fucking useless to everyone for 6 weeks. So, like, what good are you? And I guess if you get so absorbed in, you know, there's sometimes the best thing you could do. I mean, if you're a gardener, you don't water the plant. You can water the plants and you can give them the fucking nutrients or whatever, like, supplements you give plants. Staring at it and watching it then isn't really going to help it grow any faster.
No, there has to be a sense of independence for that thing.
Yeah.
You know, stuff has to work on its own in some regard.
Yeah.
In the same way that you can do everything in your power possible to make sure that the kid you have is going to grow up and be this amazing thing. But they're also going to have their own experiences and they're going to find things out for themselves, and that might completely change what you were trying to give them. And, you know, it's a weird one.
They'll be keen to make mistakes of their own as well,
Yeah, 100%.
regardless of, you can't. You probably have learned all of the stuff that they'll learn, and the idea is that you don't want them to learn the hard way, but sometimes they just want to, and that is
and they have to in some regards.
Sometimes,
right?
yeah,
Like,
I think they
that
do.
is that, and again, it goes back to what we were talking about before, which is mistakes. That you either win or you learn, right? So, Funny enough, on that topic, I always remember, right, so the first time I ever played Call of Duty 4, so the original Modern Warfare, right? This is it's a weird tangent, but it's going to make sense, I promise. In the campaign, when you died, before you respawn, there was a screen that came up.
I was going to say spoiler, but no, you're just talking about when you failed.
Yeah, exactly, when you fail a mission, right? Yeah. There's always a quote that comes up. Yeah. And there's one quote that has stuck with me for this entire time. Yeah. And it is, those who do not study history are condemned to repeat it. Yeah. Now, that can obviously apply to like politics and, you know, all sorts of stuff, right? But I think you can also take that into your own life and you can say, right, what I did then was a mistake. I made that mistake. If I don't learn from it and I don't reflect on that mistake and I don't understand how I can improve out of it, I'm just going to probably repeat that same mistake again. And the same thing, like when you have kids, you've made mistakes. So if they can sort of learn from you and you can have that real open communication with them and make sure that they understand what's going on, they can sort of learn from your mistakes and then move on from that. But
when is it time to move on from a mistake?
I think that varies.
When have you thought about it enough and it's just time to fucking shut the fuck up and get on with it?
I think it varies depending on the mistake and the severity of the mistake and how much time you personally want to give to it in order to understand what you can learn from it and how you can move on.
What would be an example of doing it too far, going too far with it?
As in like dwelling on it too much and like not actually learning from it. I think when you start to change and become negative and like if you've got a good inner circle, those people will tell you that you need to like move on and do this and you need to move on from this and you'll become better. Yeah. If you don't have that, it's obviously very difficult, but that's one of the main things you want to have in life is make sure you have those people around you to help you. But I guess from a personal perspective, it's difficult. It's a difficult one to try and figure out without being
one of the things that Jordan suggested on the podcast with Jocko was that you naturally you drag yourself over the coals with a mistake. You beat yourself up about it. And he said you kind of have to be honest. You do have to do that. You do have to feel guilty about it, unfortunately. But only until you've learnt your lesson. Then, once the lesson is learnt, it's really just inefficiency to continue past that point. Yeah. You might continue beating yourself up for a while, but at that point, you're not really getting any return from it. Like, no. If you've learned from the mistake already, there is no point carrying on.
You've got everything you needed from it, right? Like, there's no point in dwelling. And then again, that goes back to the difference of dwelling and reflecting. Like, you don't want to dwell in it because then you just end up in a hole of just like, you just go round and round in circles in your head being like, oh, why did I do this? Why did I make that decision? I shouldn't have done that, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not helpful. Like, you want to see it as a way to improve and you want to see it as okay, I made that mistake, right, it's bad. I get that. But how can I be better from it?
I'm curious to go back a bit to the bit where we were talking about loyalty and over time, things changing, dynamics changing, and when we were talking about, how children change the trajectory of your life and kind of exploring what's the difference between, losing yourself and finding yourself, so to speak, because they're kind of two sides of the same coin, aren't they? Have you lost sight of, I used to be a skateboarder. That used to be my thing. I'm not now. I'm an ex-skateboarder now. That's the new thing that I've done. But I've picked up loads of new hobbies. So have I lost myself? Do I feel when I wake up in the morning? Do I feel like I used to have it, man? I used to be a skateboarder, and now I'm this washed-up ex-skateboarder that can, hasn't learned anything new. I don't feel like that at all.
No, because I could say the same thing about football.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, that used to be my thing. Yeah. And then climbing came along, and then that's my identity. That's who I am, right? Like.
So what's the difference between losing loyalty for your friends and reassigning them a new natural order of importance based on what the true order of importance should be? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Because let's take us to, say, 2 years ago. We saw each other pretty much every day. We were speaking every day. We bounced off each other for every single thing, and we were supremely close. Now we've got misses that help fill that gap. I don't feel particularly offended by that. I would expect you to put your missus first, not me.
Yeah.
If I called you saying I've broken down, I need help, and she called you at the same time and said I've broken down, I need help, and you came to me,
I'd say call the AA.
I'd be fucking ashamed of you. I'd be ashamed.
I'd be like, both of you, call the AA, I'm busy. I wouldn't.
And obviously, because we have such a good friendship, that sort of goes without saying that stuff to a certain degree, although it's interesting to air it out loud and say what we subconsciously know out in the open on this format of the pod.
Yeah.
But obviously it's not going to be an issue for us. That's just a natural kind of, it's the same thing when I went to uni. You know, we basically didn't speak for 3 years.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
Or at least for the first year, we didn't speak at all, actually. But that was just a natural course of things at the time. And then it came back and, you know, whatever. So I just wanted to explore what the difference of that is. What's the difference between losing loyalty for someone and them just taking their actual rightful spot?
I think that's just like you put it, it's like a natural order of things in some regard, right? Like, I always have this thing of like everything in life happens for a reason, and that's always my big thing. And you know, I think we've talked about it before in terms of like, what do you believe in? Do you believe in a higher power? Do you believe in something? Like, what do you call it? Do you call it God? Do you call it the universe? Like, what do you call it, right? But I think faith is important, and I think you have to have faith in something. You have to have faith in that things are going to happen for a reason. And whatever happens, you just have to accept that is the way it is. So if some people drop out of your life, as long as you're not being a dick about it towards them, if it's just a natural, if you just let it naturally take its course, like, you know, you probably got the same as me. There's loads of people in school that you used to talk to and you used to be best mates with. Now, as life moves on, they've taken a different seat in the like ranking in your list, if you like, right? So
now I wouldn't wee on them if they were on
yeah,
fire.
well, that's it. Yeah, exactly, right? So it's kind of one of those things where things happen in life, you grow, you change, things happen, and as long as you can go through it with a positive mindset and not be negative towards those people, be like, oh, that person doesn't talk to me anymore, and just be a bit like, well, that's just the way it is. There's no negativity towards that person, it's just we've grown apart, and people fill, like you say, people fill those gaps, and that's just sort of what happens, really.
Yeah, I guess you shouldn't be so afraid of losing what you are to become something that you could be. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Damn. Yeah, I think, yeah. I know what you mean.
That's the kind of idea that's been roaming around my head from all of this is, yes, now is pretty sweet, but I think the presumption should be that it could be much better.
Do you believe there's like do you believe in sort of like destiny and like a laid out plan?
No, I don't know if I do.
Do you think you create that?
I don't know if I do. I believe that when you first said everything happens for a reason, I thought, does it? Because that does imply that we already know what the ending is, and we're just on our way to getting there. And you know, the plot is the plot, kind of thing. And I'm not entirely sure that's true. It could be. It's just as plausible as my belief.
Yeah.
I think that there is a plan. I think whether or not it's successful or not is down to you. So I do think that responsibility has to enter it into a little bit.
What's up, winners? If you're loving this podcast, make sure to drop us a 5-star review on Spotify. And if you aren't already, be sure to follow us on our social media channels. That's YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. 2 Beast Podcast, the number 2 Beast Podcast. Let's get back to the show.
The thought that everything happens for a reason, or the fact that the idea that there's a predetermined plan, kind of implies that you could take a back seat and what'll be will be.
Just let things play out.
Yeah, and there is value to that, but again, it's like all things, there's always nuance. That sounds like an eternal truth, but again, people, just like the truth thing, people can hide behind that. You know, it is what it is, what will be will be. People can hide behind that to justify inaction. Well, not always what will be will be. You could actually stop that from happening if you wanted to, but you've been a lazy prick and you've been on the games, and now everything's fucked. So the idea that everything happens for a reason, maybe. I think what's more likely is you have the potential. When you are born, you have maximum potential. You have the potential to be the best version of you that you could possibly be. How close you actually get to there in the final analysis is entirely down to you.
Yeah.
So you will be given opportunities, and I include struggle in the opportunities because they mold you. So when you wonder why all this bad stuff is happening to you, that is just, admittedly, some people get a pretty fucking raw deal, and I'm not really sure how to work that out yet, but maybe I'll come back to that in a sec. You get thrown optimal challenges, let's say, your way, for the most part. Sometimes they're a bit easier than you can handle, sometimes they're a bit harder than you can handle, but you get through them at some point somehow anyway. And that allows you to put bricks in your wall of confidence.
Yeah.
Like, the stack of proof. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's down to you. So yes, it's guaranteed that you could be successful. It's not guaranteed that you will be successful.
Yeah, the potential is there in everyone.
Yes.
Whether you get to that point is down to you, right? Yeah, I think I agree. I think that actually there is an element of things are going to happen, and again, the way to look at it is probably like you say, they're opportunities, and you can do sort of what you will with them, really. And depending on which decisions you make and which opportunities you take and which ones you turn away, that's going to really dictate where you're going to go. So yeah, I think there is a sort of a good thing about having both. So there is an element of sort of like, okay, what will be, and I think more so, it's like you make a decision and then you think, okay, what will be, and I will deal with whatever comes through making that decision.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the better way to look at it, really.
Yeah. I don't think so. Yeah. But I suppose everything happens for a reason. It doesn't necessarily. That's why I didn't know whether I really agreed with that or not.
Maybe there's a better way to say it than that.
I don't know if there is. I think it's just you have to be clear on what you mean by that. There's so many. When you boil something down into a simple phrase, it can be taken so many different ways.
Yeah.
That's why
it's quite a blanket statement, isn't it, really?
That's why nihilism is so popular in today's world, because it's so easy to just say, "Oh, fuck the world, it's bullshit." And that is true to a certain degree. So you can, if it's a simple statement, you can twist it however you want. Everything happens for a reason. Everything is a test or a reward.
Yeah.
I think that's
probably
true.
a better way to say it, isn't it?
I think so. I sometimes, we've talked about gratitude like ages ago, I think, but it will be little things like a song will come on that I haven't heard in a while, and it'll be like fucking sweet. I'm like, this song's a banger. And I'll be like, thank you. This is like, it feels like a little reward, just a small reward.
Yeah.
I've obviously done something good this day, because here we go. Even little things like,
It's the little wins, right?
I see 2 magpies, and I'm like, that's a little sign of encouragement there, because supposedly that means joy. And maybe you buy into that stuff, maybe you don't. But either way, the signal of 2 magpies, I'm pretty fucking fortunate for that.
Yeah.
Equally, it is absolutely the case that you can use confirmation bias to your advantage. If you're looking for something pretty when you're out and about in the chaos, you will find it. You'll
probably find it, yeah.
100%. Every time. I've never looked and not found something that makes my day feel like it was worth having.
Yeah.
Wow, let's just sit on that for a minute while we think about where the fuck we were going with that point. I mean, that is the point.
That is the point, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So everything is either
test or a reward.
Everything is either a test or a reward.
Yeah.
I do believe that.
It's again, win or you learn, right?
And then I suppose the argument to that is, well, why do some people suffer extreme poverty? Because I'm assuming in my life everything happens to be a relatively fair test.
Yeah.
Even if it's brutal. I mean, like, some people lose family members young. I mean, I can't help but notice that they get through it. this is where religious people cop out and they say, I don't pretend to know the plan. And I too do not know the plan.
Yeah.
I know that the plan for me has worked out very well so far, and I'm very, very grateful for that. I think maybe with people who have especially hard lives, I mean, tragedy is tragedy. There's not much you can do about it. It's just a fucking shock factor, isn't it? But I think more times than people would like to admit, insurmountable challenges are a result of small mistakes built up over time. They probably started as reasonable challenges, and then you failed, and then you failed again, and then you failed again. And it might not be your fault, because we've all been stopped from making mistakes by a strong community. And maybe you didn't have that, and maybe that is just bad luck for you. But for whatever reason, you didn't reflect or understand where you went wrong before. Maybe you took the direction of lying to yourself about it instead and saying it wasn't my fault, it was that person's fault or that person's fault, and now you're in this fucking shit show of a thing that you call a life. You can still get out of it. It's just, I think when you get to the point where if you have a really big challenge, then your goalpost of what the best case scenario is changes. You can still get to your best case scenario. You can always get to your best case scenario. It just might not be.
It varies to person, doesn't it? Especially like depending on the cards you were dealt when you were brought into this world, like that plays a huge factor. And again, like you say, some people have it way worse than others. But there's success stories all over the shop, and throughout history of people, coming out of the mud and out of the thick of it and into success and into, completely changing their life and turning it around completely 180,
Well, I think maybe we talked about, one of our podcast episodes, we talked about what's the difference between gratitude and complacency. I think it was one of your topics.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
The ancient wisdom that, I'm just going to tap this because it's cracking and it's going out of focus. One of the ancient bit of wisdom is like, you don't need anything. It's all within you. You can find peace within yourself. And I think maybe what that's talking about is you have maximum potential when you're younger, let's say, like when you're born. That's when you're at max potential. As you make more and more mistakes, your potential bar comes down a little bit. You haven't lived your life with perfect efficiency. Yeah. No one does, right? Maybe you've had a catastrophic life. Maybe you've fucking gambled and drank and, been in prison and whatever, and now you're 65 with cancer, you've got 12 months to live, and you're pretty much fucked, and you've pretty much been a loser the entire time. Well, you can still find peace within yourself by using what time you have left to make that life better. As long as you're alive, the potential for things to get better is there.
It's still there, yeah.
So too is true that the potential for it to get worse is there, and that really depends on whether or not you're a lazy fucking twat or not. Like, you need to get on with it. But maybe the piece is, let's say someone in the heart of Africa in maximum poverty, where they're scraping by to simply feed themselves. And water is a bit of a trek. It's like 5 miles down the road and back and all the rest of it. They still find peace and joy. They are some of the most happiest people on the planet. Is the answer, oh, well, you don't need that much to be happy? I don't know I think that's oversimplifying it. I think maybe it's you've done the best with what you've got. And I don't think there's a better way to say it than that. You've done the best with what you've got, and you've done okay.
Yeah.
So you've used your time effectively, and you've built what you've built out of what you've had, and that's a very good fucking deal. And you can feel peace in that.
Yeah.
I think a lack of knowing that you wasted potential and opportunity is the thing that would take a piece away from you.
Yeah, and I think that's about like not regretting anything, I think, isn't it? And just sort of like we talked about before with guilt, and just you kind of just have to move on with it, and you have to, yeah, like you say, find the peace, and whatever way that is for you, like you have to find that peace, and whatever brings you happiness, even if it's like the smallest little things that you can then build up to something big, you know.
What disturbs your peace? Do you ever feel like you're wasting potential?
Yes, in some way, but I'm yet to decide whether that is just because the inspiration I get from people is like, work hard, man, every day, put the hours in, do this, do that, discipline, blah, 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 blah. Or whether that is the way to live, and whether that is how I want to live. Or whether that is just a consequence of what I've chosen to sort of surround myself with, really. Like, is that how I want to live my life? Is it like I want to put the work in, and I want to do this, I want to do that, or is it just like yeah? It's a hard battle. It's a hard battle between being too content with what you have, and then not going and achieving anything else.
I think what you're talking about is it seems like you're questioning whether it's all worth it.
Yeah.
And there's a song from First Aid Kit called Stay Gold, and the chorus is, what if our hard work ends in despair? What if the road doesn't take us there? And that's kind of playing on that same idea of, I think that's a common, where people on the path, whatever the path is, I would say the path is in whatever form you're doing in life. The path is just the correct one, in the sense of you're trying to be a good person, you're trying to be better, you're taking responsibility for yourself. Those three things. What being better looks like is contextually relevant. So it's hard to prescribe a one-size-fits-all fucking design for that. But I think things get hard, and so you naturally question, your mind is questioning whether or not it's worth it. Like when we do a long run, let's say, and we flag, like say when we do the Hope 24,
Yeah.
and we're trying to run 100k, we're going to get to, at the start, we're going to be fine because our body's going to believe it's possible. When we get to 45k and we're absolutely battered and we've got little injuries and niggles and my ankle's hurting and my knee's a bit fucked, and what's all that about? Our mind is actually trying to save us. Like we always talk about beating the mind and like forcing it into submission and controlling it and wrangling it. And I think that's quite an adversarial way to look at it. I think the mind is actually trying to fucking help you.
Yeah.
It's trying to save you. It's trying to, it's making the assessment based on what it knows, which is relative extreme comfort. And it's saying, you already feel pretty fucking bad and you're trying to do 55 more K on top of this. I'm not sure that's a good idea. There's actually a high risk of injury here and a high risk that you might damage yourself and maybe even a potential of death. So maybe we should pull back from this. And that's you.
It's the fight or flight, like survival instinct, isn't it?
That's you having a weasel moment.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not it's actually you being a weasel in the final analysis, it depends on how you objectively assess someone's resilience.
Yeah.
Or how you objectively assess the difficulty of the task. Like, when I was talking about the fake grind in an episode months ago, I was saying that, you know, I was starting to get into a headspace where I thought I was really fucking tough for getting in the cold shower for 2 minutes. And I was like, am I actually being tough here? Or is it actually just pretty fucking easy?
Yeah.
Because my context now of what I know is possible, even what my body has done
has changed
in cold water, is so beyond the fucking 2 minute cold shower now that the idea that I personally might be tough for doing that is fucking ridiculous. Now, somebody who's mortifully afraid of cold water, who's never gotten cold water before, who has fought through the panic and the shivers and the losing their breath and all that stuff, fair enough. That's an accomplishment to be proud of. But for me, that's done that like 300 times. 301 ain't nothing to have a fucking fanfare about.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just get on with it, innit? Now I remember the Hope 24 piece, but I don't remember where I was going with that thread. The mind, gratitude, peace. They're all up there. We've got plenty of plates spinning in the sky. And absolutely zero fucking way to get them down. Oh, I don't know. It's a complicated fucking thing, life. Anyway, I'm afraid that point may be lost until next time I get in the thread.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's calm it down a bit, shall we? It's been intense.
It's been deep, man.
It's been deep. It's been
like,
a good one.
It's been really good, but it's been 45 minutes of deep.
Yeah, I know. I'm too tired for
like 50 minutes of deep. I apologise if we've put you to sleep.
No,
Everyone.
I think this is one of our best fucking episodes so far. Like of our individual ones.
Yeah, yeah.
I think this is exactly the kind of stuff that we'd like to talk about. We'd actually want these to be interesting.
Yeah.
You know. I've been doing my hour each week of podcast improvement and looking at things like thumbnails, titles, all that stuff, you know, how we can make these podcasts more engaging. One of the big things that we're going to work on the podcast is how we do topics. I think one of the really interesting things is we've always, for some reason, I think I know where it's come from. But the way we've done these podcasts before is we've made separate notes about things that we might want to talk about. And then we've not talked to each other about those things until we've got on the pod.
Poor communication skills.
Well, I think the reason we've done it is because we joked about how, like, if we were having this deep conversation and the cameras were off, we'd be like, we're fucking missing out on pod content. You know, so we're like worried to talk to each other before the pod.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to say something insightful or something interesting that would have been good pod content.
Yeah. Don't start a podcast, everyone. You'll ruin your best friend relationships.
Yeah, but that we've applied that to coming up with ideas for what we talk about, which is silly. Like, this has worked out. This is the first time I actually sent him a screenshot of what I thought we should talk about.
And then when I was walking home just now, I made notes based on those things you're talking about.
You can think about it, yeah.
Yeah.
It seems obvious now. I don't know why we never did that before. But we are...
Because we're still learning.
We are still learning.
We're still learning. We're
One of the
making
things-
mistakes and we're learning.
One of the things in the Lex and Rogan podcast was he was like, basically my big advice is just to keep doing stuff, like especially podcasts. And he said I was so not good at conversations when I first started, or like definitely not as good as I am now, just from doing the 2,000-3,000 episodes or whatever it is he's done.
Yeah.
So that was a reassuring thing to hear from the GOAT. Was just, I've just got to keep going. It is going to be bad.
Time, man.
It's stuff that we know, but it's like, it is still reassuring because I do feel, sometimes I think like we're fucking 33 episodes in and I feel like we haven't really done much to improve it. Like we're still just rambling and not knowing stuff. But I think we're approaching a critical pivot. Where
I said this to you the other day in that where we've had it, the topic of like self-improvement and all of this sort of stuff. The ironic thing is that the most self-improved thing is the pod itself.
Is us, yeah.
Is us and the podcast itself, yeah.
And I'm excited about seeing what return, because equally, to be fair, for like, I don't know, we had the initial motivation of this is a new thing, let's do it. We had all these like big dreams and whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the reality of what it is set in and the fact that, but it's not hard work. We don't spend a lot of time on this talk. It's like 3-4 hours a week tops.
Yeah, if that.
But the reality set in and we're kind of like, ooh, pull back a bit, maybe drive into the fucking Leeds every week for a fucking guest episode isn't the most effective strategy for our bank.
No.
You know, we don't want to get into mountains of debt. I mean, mountains more debt, of course. We've already taken so much money on this pod.
My bank balance is horrific because of this pod.
We've not spent a single fucking penny on this pod, by the way. If you're wondering, all this stuff is stuff that's used for my professional videography business. So we haven't spent a single fucking penny. If you're worried about us being financially destitute as a result of this venture. Rest assured, we will eat. Don't you worry about that. Wow.
It's mind blank central today.
I'm so good at going on tangents and then fucking it up. God damn.
Well, one thing I can say is I don't have any wasabi with me today, so that's going to have to wait until next week.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck that, didn't I?
We still haven't done these challenge things.
No.
But we never planned to be fair. The plan was to sort of fit them in at the end of the week.
As and when we can.
This is, I've done 5 days of 10K every day for 10 days.
Yeah.
So I'm over halfway through now. I'm about to get my 6th day in immediately after this pod.
Oh, I've taken a week off because I had an injury in my knee that was being aggravated by work.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So I had a good start to my marathon training. Like the first week I had was good. Mm-hmm. Like I was well above pace, well above like everything I needed to be. And yeah, what I think prescribed myself as runner's knee, which is like a pain in the back of your knee. Like it's not the big tendon, like your MCL or ACL, whatever that is. Yeah. It's like actually in behind the kneecap. Okay. It's kind of weird. But I think it's getting better now. So my plan is to essentially take this weekend off, and then as of Monday or Tuesday or whenever I start my runs again, then it will be back to smashing road.
The other thing you could do is use cross trainer.
Yeah.
To keep from a cardiovascular perspective.
Well, my thinking was like I was so far ahead of my cardio was pretty good. I know it drops off quite quickly, but I think I should be all right to just jump straight back on it, and I shouldn't have lost much. But
no, I mean fuck it.
Yeah.
I've had a horrible habit of getting slightly faster every day on my 10Ks, which I'm nervous about because, okay, great, my cardiovascular ability is obviously improving rapidly, but muscles don't improve that rapidly.
No.
So the chances that I'm running myself into an unsustainable pace that causes me an injury in my legs.
Well, that's kind of what I think this is I think I've just been pushing it just a bit too hard in terms of pace-wise, and not building up the stamina in the muscles, essentially, in your joints.
But I will say the first 3 days were probably the hardest. Then yesterday and the day before, I mean, I'll give a full report when I'm actually finished because it could all go to shit yet. I mean, today, I will say, today's the first day where I've actually felt like DOMS, like tightness in my legs.
Yeah.
I haven't really felt that the last... Although I did start with... I had particularly bad DOMS in my calves, which doesn't happen too often, but I trained calves one day. Same stuff I normally do, but it was like really burning this time.
Yeah.
I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then suddenly it was like... The next day, I was getting out of bed and I was pissing and moaning to Jess. She was getting sick of it. I was getting up and I was like stumbling forwards. I couldn't fucking stand up on my calves. I was like, what the fuck's going on? I'm supposed to be running 10K every fucking day tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And second day DOMS, naturally, worse. So that was a bit of a fucking ropey start. But yeah, I kind of, the first 3 days were hard for that reason and then they got easy again. But yeah, who knows, today I'm a bit tight, so I might eventually whittle down, but so far there's no dramas, like it's just a bit of a faff to fucking take an hour out of your day rather than 30 minutes, but it is what it is, isn't it?
It is what it is.
The game do be gaming.
Yeah.
Oh well, fucking, I don't know. I suppose we could do a quick game.
Yeah, quick one.
Quick game.
All
right, ladies and gentlemen. So one of the things I was saying is we're going to be improving the content of this pod, and some of you already enjoy the pod, but even people who think this pod is absolute wank are going to be in love with this pod in the next year or two. Because actually, I don't know if I talked to you about this as well. I think I did slightly. YouTube's made their policy for monetization about half as easy. So, excuse me.
Oh, you did? Yeah, you mentioned this.
So we used to need to get to 1,000 subs before we could monetize. Now we only need to get 500. And across all of our shorts on YouTube alone, we get around 20,000 views a month.
It's doing very well. Like YouTube, for some reason, is all of a sudden. I mean, we're on 179 subscribers already. So,
I mean, admittedly, those are all. Like most of those views are shorts, which I think get monetized less.
Yeah.
I think they earn pittance. But 20,000 views is 20,000 views worth of ad revenue. We might actually, fucking for all you haters out there, we might actually be making a little bit of money on this.
Yeah.
It might all be
we
worth
can
it.
get out of the debt that we've sunk ourselves in.
Oh yeah, well that fucking debt. Oh dear. Oh, cool. Amazon's just notified me that they think that I would like the new Walking Dead t-shirts and hoodies. Well, I tell you what, Amazon, why don't you go fuck yourself?
Ooh. Sting.
I would like that t-shirt and hoodie as well.
Damn it! How would you know?
Where the fuck is it? I got the tier list, but I want to know where the blind rank. Is it this? Mousetrap Games. Oh no, you know what? Let's just fucking end a good thing there. Have you got anything else to say?
No, I don't think so.
All right, there you go. That was a podcast about fucking guilt and making mistakes and all that stuff.
The key quote to take away from today is...
always wipe your ass front to back.
Nice!
Thank you for listening to the Two Beast podcast. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share this podcast on whatever your preferred platform is. We'll see you next time. All the best.